Hello, and welcome to the Slate Political Gabfest for December 9th, 2020, the 15th anniversary edition. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. We wish we were live in a theater somewhere, but we're in our living rooms. I'm David Plotz of CityCast. I'm at home in my living room in Washington, D.C. I am joined by my beloved co-hosts of all these years from New York City, John Dickerson of CBS's 60 Minutes. Hello, John.
Hello, David.
And from New Orleans, yet she's found yet another a new place to go, not a New Haven, a New Orleans. Emily Bazelon of Yale University Law School and the New York Times Magazine. Hello, Emily.
Hello, John and David.
Did you guys get your Trump pardon in the mail today? I got mine. It's great.
What crime would you be guilty of that you would need pardoning for?
I think, as we'll discover in the course of the show, it's probably sanctimony and stupidity. What about you?
Luckily, those are not in the criminal statute.
Yeah. Let's see, what would it be? I don't know, maybe some petty larceny, just to spice up the day.
Emily? You don't have to.
See.
It's okay. You're on the record.
Greed, avarice, impatience, vanity, irritation.
Do you know charity, chastity, prudence, and hope? That my mother had this. I'm sure I've said this on the show before. My mother had this friend who was the youngest of three girls. The first girl was named Faith. The second one was named Hope, and the third one was named Brenda.
Give up.
Anyway,
someone came to their senses.
So we are at our quinceañera. The 15th anniversary is the crystal anniversary, which is appropriate because on the Gabfest, we try to be clear and sharp like crystal, and we break crystal when we occasionally hurl it at each other, as even happy families do. But tonight we're here to celebrate, hopefully not too self-indulgently, the longest and most satisfying venture, at least of my professional career. Week after week after week, the three of us show up in studios, on stage, on Zoom, to have a conversation among dear friends. And we began podcasting the year podcasting was coined, apparently. We were brought together by our former colleague and godfather of Slate podcasting, Andy Bowers. We are still joyfully here, and I'm so glad to be here with you guys for a night of nostalgia, for a nostalgia trip.
Oh yeah, we're happy to be with you too.
We're thrilled, and we look forward to someday.
It sure seems like it. Sure seems like we're happy about it.
Audience actually in person.
Yes. So it's gonna be sort of a normal structure. We're gonna reminisce about some of our favorite Gabfest moments, some issues that have obsessed and fascinated us, and about what we learned from each other. Then apparently there's a surprise video. We don't know what it is, but there's gonna be a surprise. And then we will do some cocktail chatter. Plus, we're going to take your questions live. So wherever you're watching this, you can put your questions directly in the chat, Facebook, YouTube, and we will pick them up and get some of them. So we're also doing something special for this 15th anniversary special show, which is that we have a partner, the Winemakers series, and we're going to be tasting 3 carefully selected wines from Round Pond Estate, one for each segment of the show tonight. And we're really happy that hundreds of you are going to be able to taste those wines from home along with us. And for those of you who did not get a chance to pre-order your wine in time for the show, you can try the same 3 wines for yourself at a special post-show discounted price. And if you stick with us, we will tell you how to do that later in the show.
And
so
hold on, my dear brother just sent me a picture of his 3 wines lined up in front of his computer. Yeah, which I guess is where he always has his 3 wines lined up in front of his computer. But tonight they're
for that brother.
Yes, exactly.
So Round Pond Estate wines are artfully crafted by winemaker Thomas Rivers Brown, and Round Pond is an ultra premium Cabernet Sauvignon producer, which specializes, in expressive wines, artisan foods, and unforgettable experiences in the heart of Napa Valley. So if you're tasting along at home, we're going to start with a white wine. It's a Rutherford Sauvignon Blanc, which I'm going to pour from over here. Here I go, off mic. Did we pick up those glugs, Joss? And the interesting thing about this wine, they say, is that they pick the grapes at 3 different times during harvest, which means that there are 3 different levels of ripeness in the same bottle, which adds complexity to the wine. So it's like having a blend of 3 wines, all from the same kind of grape. All right. Yum. The second bottle we're going to get to, I've drunk most of in the past 24 hours. So this one, I'm getting to crack.
Yeah.
So let's get started.
This was my breakfast wine.
So we're going to talk about what's happened over 15 years, some of which what happened on the show and some of which just happened in the world. So I want to talk with a really big and probably the most serious piece of the night, which is what has changed. We are a political show. John, what has changed in politics? What are the fundamental things that have changed in politics from the time we started this back in 2005?
Can we, just before we get into the serious, can we just for a moment paint the picture of what the first room was in which we did the show? So for those of you at home, briefly. So imagine you have a TV tray. That's the size of the desk on which we had these 3 microphones planted. And they were in a conference room, which I've said it before, I'll say it again, was the saddest chair museum in America. It had like 30 different chairs.
Somebody better than leaving them. Wow. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was your disembodied voice coming in. It had 30 different chairs and all of them in their last exhausted breath before they totally collapsed. And that's where we did the show for years, right? Anyway, that's what's changed in politics. It feels like, because I spent so much time thinking about the presidency, so, I mean, we've learned that so much was part of an agreement, and that agreement required everybody to kind of agree to it. And it turns out the power of that agreement can be challenged across so many different areas, and that it doesn't just take one president who chooses to not heed to that agreement, but that you can have an entire party, which once was the standard keeper of a lot of those agreements, not think that they mean so much anymore. And that, all the rules that I covered when I first came to Washington in 1995, so many of them are up for grabs and are being redefined. And we're about to head into an amazing period of redefinition, or maybe not. But so I guess the extent to which so much was an agreement and how that has been revealed.
This is interesting because Emily, I'm going to ask you sort of the legal end of that. But before I ask you that, can I actually, because John, you approached it from the vector of the presidency. I'll approach it from the vector of sort of the citizenry, which is that I feel like Jonathan Rauch had this wonderful piece. He's an Atlantic writer, maybe 5 years ago, where he pointed out a really significant number of Americans didn't believe in politics anymore, that they fundamentally didn't trust the process that was politics, the idea of compromise, the idea that you negotiated in partnership with a loyal opposition, and people gave some and got some, because what had happened was that there was so much cynicism about the system because people were doing, like, their lives weren't great, but also people had just become divided from each other, that you so lived in a world of people like you, that people who were not like you had become quite threatening and alien, and in some cases, not equal to you, not legitimate. And I think when you have citizens, when Rauch wrote the piece, I think he was saying it was like 30% of Americans. I think today you'd probably poll it and you'd find a much higher percentage of people who basically don't believe in the political compact. And when you have and most of those people are on the right, not all of them, but most of them are on the right. And when you have that much distrust in the political system, I just don't see how it can operate in the long term. Emily, do you want to take it from a legal perspective? Like, what do you think the biggest shift is there?
I'm not sure the biggest shifts are legal, actually. In some ways, I don't think, we've had huge things happen. I mean, we had the legalization of same-sex marriage, enormous change for civil rights and changes in people's lives that are very real. When you think, though, about the kinds of political divide you're describing, though, I don't actually think it's the laws that have changed. I mean, this has become a cliche to trot out at this point about the Trump presidency, but it's really the set of norms when you talk about agreement and social compact. I wonder, though, so when we started the show in 2005, George W. Bush was president, correct? That is a true fact.
Correct.
Yes.
And
Are you trying to tell us
Ladies and
something
gentlemen,
here?
reading political analyst of the age, Emily Bazelon.
it's just amazing the things I get wrong. And when you think about going back to George W. Bush's presidency, I do wonder how much the fact that these sort of norms of agreement, of like the rules of the road still appearing to operate, was masking some actually very deep divisions. I mean, when you think about, you know, the Iraq War, the abuses, the torture that took place at that time, the deep divisions over whether to do anything about inequality and poverty, which were beginning to be bigger problems then I start to wonder if there's actually more of a continuum, and it was just that people observed niceties more on each side, and so we didn't see it. I mean, I'm not sure I myself agree with that thesis, but let's put it out there for a moment. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, can't you have both? I mean, in other words, you can have one set of roiling problems that are bigger than we knew, and then you can have the death of agreement and norms, and they're connected, but they don't. I think they can both exist. I think the power to blow through a lot of those norms, the propulsive force behind it, is the connection that those who felt upset with the political system, the connection they felt to President Trump and still feel to him, is in part, surely must be in part inflamed, although then we can get into a conversation about why there's the adhesion to President Trump that there is, but is inflamed by some of those issues that you are arguing perhaps were, you know, thundering beneath the surface, but that weren't as much of our public dialogue, although they were kind of part of our public dialogue. But
I mean, sometimes I think it's a difference in degree, and right now it feels like a difference in kind. I mean, I don't think the outgoing Bush administration did not behave in this fashion. It was different. Right? Because it wasn't the end of a one-term presidency when President Obama became president. This I feel certain of, and you're nodding affirmatively. But so in that sense, it's different. But it's still, I just can't imagine those politicians, those elected officials, those appointed officials behaving in this way. And so this moment does feel like a different in kind. And yet there are ways in which I think the Republican Party was stoking the division. It just didn't quite understand how big the embers were that then have burst into flame.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to the David Plotz's favorite thesis, which is that the most important election of our lifetimes was in 1992, and George H.W. Bush should have won, and that would have potentially prevented the Republican Party from going in this disastrous direction. But we can save that for another year. I want to talk about something that's near and dear to me, which is something that we've changed our thinking on because of each other. And let me go first on this because I have something queued up. I've been listening back to some of our favorite bits. Jocelyn pulled some of them. And I want to play this incredible moment back from 2014. I actually think this is the greatest moment in Gabfest history. And it's I'm embarrassed at myself and incredibly impressed at Emily. And it's I was completely wrong. She was absolutely right. And I learned a lot, and it's stuck with me. And so it dates back to 2014. And the backstory is that a woman named Deborah Harrell had been arrested for endangering the life of her daughter. She worked at McDonald's. Her daughter had played on a laptop at McDonald's while her mom worked. Then the laptop was stolen, and the daughter asked if she could play on a playground instead. So the mom gave her daughter a cell phone and let her play on the playground. And while this child was playing alone, another parent saw the daughter and called the cops. So we discussed this, and we started off by agreeing we all felt rage at the situation, and we talked a bit, but we pick up this clip right now as I was commenting that the playground wasn't the worst option for a kid to be there for. The clip is about 5 minutes long, so bear with it, because I think it really, Emily, congratulations.
It doesn't seem like the worst place to leave somebody, better than leaving them indoors without
or not around other people.
Have we looked at the statute in South Carolina about whether it would have been endangerment to leave her home alone all day?
Well, the statute in South Carolina, like the statute everywhere, is very vague. It's about, being reasonable, providing reasonable supervision under the circumstances, which is always what these laws say. So like if you leave, I have definitely left my 11-year-old home for some amount of time. And what the jokes about, well, how long could that last for before you get in trouble? There's no answer to that question because it's all very discretionary from the point of view of the state.
We don't really need to get to this because it's been made. The point has been made. But one reason why everyone's so outraged is, what if the child had been abducted? And of course, we just have to point out there are so few stranger abductions in this country as you might as well say none. There are not none, but there are just so few. Someone calculated that if you leave a child alone in a car, the child would have to wait there for 750,000 years before the child would be abducted by a stranger.
So this is where it gets back to
so much more. Right. It's so much more dangerous to drive around with your kid in the car just based on the number of car accidents than it is to leave a child alone in the park.
Doesn't this go back to Emily's original point about race and class, which is that it's not the thing itself for which the mother was arrested, but it was tip of the iceberg. So if the kid's being left alone in a park all day, then untold horrible other things are a part of her life too. That sign of, you don't have discrete negligence. That it's.
Can we also say, what person called the police on this kid?
No. This is good. This is where we're going to have a fight. This is awesome.
My feeling about that person, whoever he or she is, was that you could ask with concern what's going on, and then maybe you try and help. How is calling the police helping
instead of
totally
wrong.
Maybe seeing if there's some way
Emily,
you could help supervise, or there's some other private resolution.
This is where your smug self-righteousness ends. Because I wanted to pose this question to you guys. Let's say you go to a playground. You go there in the morning with your child. You go there. You hang out. You see a kid playing alone. You go back at lunchtime. You left something at the park. You go back, check. Oh, the kid is still there playing alone. There's doesn't seem to be attached to any adults. You go back in the evening. The kid is still there playing alone. Would be bizarre in this world not to ask yourself questions about this child.
Yeah, well,
bizarre not to talk to the child,
David.
and bizarre when the child tells you her mom is at work or is vague about it, not to think like maybe I have a responsibility to do something.
Well, there's a middle ground.
Call the police, David. That's the part that I'm arguing with. I am with you up until that. To try to talk to the parent to see what's happening.
You assume that the police are. I assume in this society, maybe I'm wrong. The police are kind of the good guys. They're going to help sort it out, make sure the kids.
Why do you assume that? I tell my children never to speak to the police if they can possibly avoid it. The police cause trouble.
Oh my God. That is the most interesting thing I've ever learned.
No, I'm completely serious about that. You treat the police with the utmost care and you try to keep them as far away from your life as you possibly can.
That's so interesting, Emily. That is so interesting.
That's how I feel about it.
You lied to the police when the police
we have to have a show on that entire subject.
I do not think in a situation where you are worried about an unsupervised kid that calling the police is any kind of wise move unless you think there is evidence of criminality and danger. If you think a kid